Hi, Mark Rogers here. Safe Money Matters, and the good news is things are always changing. And I am a small business owner, and I'm hoping that if you're a small business owner, you could perk your ears up as to what's coming down the pike right here. We're going to talk a little bit about business exit strategy planning. And there's a new piece of research that has just come out here, and it's called Business Owner Exit Planning Research. We're going to talk just a couple highlights here with that. And with me is going to be Jim Wisdom out of LA area. Let's add him to the stage. Hey, Jim, good to see you.
Hey, good morning, Mark. Great to be with you this morning.
Well, this has been very interesting, understanding a little bit about business owner exit planning. And there's a lot of business owners that are apparently going to be transitioning out of their businesses over the next 10 or 15 years, what the research is saying. Should we just highlight a couple pieces of the research and what you've been talking? What was about to start with this basic question? What's the exit planning for a business owner? What does that mean?
Good question, Mark. And, I still find that a lot of people, they've heard the term, but they really don't know what it entails.
Uh-huh.
Certainly we've heard the term succession planning, which really focuses more on like when the owner leaves their business, who is going to succeed them. Exit planning focuses more on the person that's exiting the business. And that means after they exit, what is the rest of their life going to look like? We call it life after business planning or third act planning. But one of the things I've found is that we're still in the early stages of the exit planning industry. People are getting more familiar with the concept. And I really believe, because studies show that 50% of boomer business owners will have exited by 2025, which is next year. Two-thirds of boomer business owners will have exited by 2030, but they really don't have a good understanding of how to exit their business. And I think what every business owner wants is, I've created this lifestyle called my business, and it's made me a nice standard of living, and I've enjoyed it. It's given me a sense of identity. Shoot, if I could just continue that standard of living after I left the business, but how the heck do I do that? And they don't really start to think about that until something happens in their life where they get into their 60s. Some of them, I think the earlier generations are embracing this planning more than the boomers. But, the bottom line is we can't work in our business forever. And the light bulb eventually goes on and they realize, I got to do something before it's too late.
Well, and you and I are both business owners in our own practices, and so we're speaking to business owners as we generally have put our blood, sweat, and tears into our business, countless nights, weekends, whatever it is, for multitudes of years, and then it comes down to the whatever that time is, and it's like, what value do I get from my business? Whether I'm being planned to exit based upon, this is what I will go do something different, or maybe it's an unplanned exit, which is a health condition, right? A health condition is coming down the pike. And so now you got to figure out what's the value of my business? Therefore, what can I do with that value later on? Let me ask you this question. What makes a business attractive to an outside buyer? You were mentioning this is a key question. Many business owners have their own value. As I said, they've been working all these years and putting everything, they think it's a certain value. But really, I guess what would be important is it's really what the value is to an outside buyer. Is that how you look at it?
That's correct. And it could be an outside buyer, it could be an internal transfer. But what's attractive to an outside buyer is very different than what the owner thinks, the selling owner thinks. They think it's all driven by their revenue. So if I increase my revenue from 1x to 2x, the value of my business is going to double. Not necessarily the case.
Hmm.
The reason for that is 80% of a company's value in the eyes of a potential buyer is tied up in something called intangible capital. And if you look at the most valuable companies in the world, they don't own a lot of assets, like Microsoft and Facebook and Google. And you can Google it and you can see it, but it's what they do with the data they have and how they transfer it and share it. And so we call it the four C's. 80% of a business's potential value to an outside buyer is tied up in the four C's. What are the four C's? The first one is human capital. the strength and quality of your employees. The second is customer capital, the strength and quality of your client relationships. And it needs to be a diverse book of business. What I mean by that is you can't have one client that generates 25 to 30% or more of your revenue. That is a huge red flag to a potential buyer. Because if they leave, and a buyer always assumes the worst, they think about what can go wrong. The third thing is structural capital. And that is, what are the systems and processes that drive your organization? Are they current? Are they up to date? Or are they in the owner's head? Meaning, when the owner walks out the door, are all the systems and processes in the owner's head and the systems and processes of that company walk out the door with them? That's a disaster to a buyer.
Right.
The last thing is cultural capital. And you and I have, I'm sure, been into an organization where you walk in and you can see the culture. Culture, if it's positive, uplifting, the employees are enthusiastic, they get along with each other, that's very attractive to a potential buyer. Whereas if you have a lot of animosity within the employee ranks and there's a lot of dissension, that's very unattractive. So, anyway, the bottom line is about 80% of the value of a business to a potential buyer is tied up in those four categories. It's intangible capital. We refer to them as the four C's. One other thing I want to mention, and you talked earlier about this, we put our blood, sweat, and tears into our business.
Yeah.
One of the most important things I found when I got my designation from the Exit Planning Institute is they did a study that said the year after a business owner exited their business, 70% profoundly regretted their decision.
Hmm.
So I asked the CEO why that was the case at the break. And he said, every case was different, but most of them didn't have a clue what they were going to do with the rest of their life.
Got it.
So Peter Chrisman, the father of the Exit Planning Institute, who started the Exit Planning Institute, he wrote a book called The Master Plan. And think of it about as three legs of a stool. You got the personal planning, the business planning, and the financial planning. What often gets put on the back burner in during a person's working years as a business owner is that personal planning. They sacrifice hours away from home with their family, with their loved ones. They're trying to build that business. And many times by the time they retire, the relationship is so damaged with their family that it's really hard to take care of that. So we focus equally on personal planning as business and financial planning, if that makes sense. But to get to this study, this is the first study in 10 years by the Exit Planning Institute. And what they wanted to capture is how ready are business owners to exit and transition. And saw the survey from 2013, and the message was clearly business owners are not ready. They haven't really done any planning. They're too busy running their businesses. They don't know who to turn to. Their CPAs tell them one thing, their estate planning attorneys tell them another thing, their insurance professional tells them another thing. So they don't do anything. So this survey was just released within the last month, and it tells a much better picture. Uh, Business owners are getting more familiar with exit planning. They still have a ways to go, but they're beginning to understand that it's not like selling a home where you put a sign out, in your yard, and 2 weeks later you get a bunch of offers. And a lot of business owners think that they think, oh, I'm sure by the time I'm ready to exit, people are going to be banging down my doors, and I'll have, if it's worth $20 million, I'll get a check for 20 million, put it in the bank, and then I sail off into the sunset. Well, it doesn't work that way. So the message it tells here, I think, and this is just a broad overview, is business owners are getting more familiar with the importance of exit planning. They're getting educated. The Gen Xers are much more willing to embrace exit planning because they see the value. And, that's kind of a big picture. And did you want to get into the five
Let's jump
conclusions,
on
Mark,
down.
now, or do you want?
Yeah, yeah, let's do that. Well, only 9% of business owners in 2023 have no plans at all for their exit. So I thought that was kind of a low number. I would have thought it would have been a higher number.
Well, it is. And if you compare this survey to the one 10 years ago,
Yeah.
it's substantially different. Most of them had not done any planning.
I see.
But that's 10 years ago, and you think about all the boomers who are the majority are exiting in this decade.
Right.
And, so they're getting closer to retirement and closer to their exit, and they're realizing, "Shoot, how do I get out of this business and still maintain my standard of living?" And it just, I think it's more on their mind because they see that their runway is getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
What does it mean to be ready to transition in business? How does a business owner provide proof that they and the business are ready to transition? And so there are 10 actions here. We're not going to go over the actions, but I think we were going to refer to, is it the observations we're trying to refer to here?
Well, yeah, let's talk about readiness because that's important. There's two, I told you about these two assessments we do attractive, it's attractiveness assessment and readiness. They're
Yeah.
very different. The readiness is you could have an attractive business and it could be worth a lot of money, but you personally may not be ready to transition and your business may not be ready to transition. What I mean by that is, and I talk to business owners all the time, I say, well, have you thought about what you're going to do after you retire? And you get a blank look. That their business is their identity.
That's
So
right.
it's hard for them to think about after they're gone. So being ready is, are you personally ready? And so we help them with that. We help them get ready by talking about things that they could be doing after they they moved on from their business. Now, is their business ready? Here's an example where a business is not ready. You have an owner, we call it owner centric. The owner's closing all the deals. He's the big salesperson. He does marketing. The owner is the business. Well, if the owner is the business, there's nothing to transfer. And what buyers look for is something called transferable value. That's what's attractive to a potential buyer. If there's nothing to transfer, there's no value. And I'm the CEO of the Exit Planning Institute. I remember, reading in one book, the guy said, "Hey, Chris, I'm going to move to Denver. I'm going to build a house." He goes, "What are you going to do when you're there?" And he said, "I just told you I'm going to build my house." He said, I understand, but what are you going to do?" And he didn't have an answer. And, some people think, well, I'll just play golf for the rest of my life. Or I'll just, and this guy thought his retirement was build his home. Well, how long does it take to build a home? Maybe 6 months to a year. He really hadn't thought about it. And
Right.
that is actually could be a very bad potential exit scenario because what we want people to do is get excited about the next phase of their life. They could have been a musician before they got into their business. And by the way, we see that all the time. People that were in a band and next thing you know, oh, I could start a music school. And and so they get excited and the third act of their life is can be very attractive if they give it some thought. But the problem is during their working years, they don't most of them don't give it a lot of thought.
To make it relative to those that may not be business owners, or to make it is, if you had a house and they want to sell a house, your next question would say, well, where are you going to move? And if someone says, well, I don't know,
Right.
that's a real problem. If you're going to sell your house, at least know where you're going next. I think that's
You know,
kind of relatable what you're talking about. You sell your business. What are you going to do next is really that question.
You're right, and I hear this all the time, Mark, and I've talked to people who've retired. It doesn't matter if they're a business owner or not. I always ask them, "How is that transition for you?" And more often than not, they'll say it's difficult. And, if you own a business and your identity, you've been the boss for, let's say, 40 years, your employees come in and you call all the shots, and then all of a sudden, your identity is changing because you no longer own that business. I hear some very sad stories, and I'll just share one with you here. A guy got 35, $40 million for a business. And the next week on a Tuesday morning, he's downstairs in his house playing pool by himself. And he called Chris Snyder at the Exit Planning Institute. And he said, I don't know what I'm going to do here, and he had gone through a divorce. He didn't have a relationship with his kids. He had all this money and he was depressed. And that's exactly what I mean by, you know, balancing that stool. You got to look at the business. You got to do your personal financial planning and your personal planning, which it's hard to keep that balance in your working years because you're, like you said, you're putting in your blood, sweat, and tears. And by the time you get your payday, if you're fortunate to have a payday, it can be a real difficult transition.
Well, and then that's great. So, did you wanna go over these the observations? Is that what you wanna do on
Yeah.
this piece of research here?
Yeah, I would say, I've got the 5 observations from the survey. Continuing to immerse yourself in education.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of business owners that are attending Exit Planning Institute
Okay.
events. It doesn't have to be the Exit Planning Institute, but they're educating themselves on what it's gonna take for them to exit their business successfully, and
Yep.
they're starting to realize it's not as easy as many may think it is. Number 2, identify and understand the value of your company. Now we talk about what makes for, 80% of the value is tied up in tangible capital, but we also talk about 3 gaps when we do our analysis for the business owner: the
Mhm.
profit gap, the value gap, and the wealth gap.
Mm.
And without it getting into too much detail, we compare their business to best in class in terms of their profits, the value that they're leaving on the table, and the
Mhm.
profit they're leaving on the table versus best in class. And then the wealth gap. And really simply put, if, we always assume for the sake of argument that you don't get anything for your business because you never know, disaster can strike. Do you have enough assets outside your business to maintain your standard of living to life expectancy? If
Wow.
you don't, then we focus on what value do we need to create or deliver, help you deliver so that you can maintain your standard of living once you sell that business. Concentrate on value and income generation. We constantly tell business owners that when we talk about exit planning, it's just simply good business planning, because what we train the business owner to realize is that making more money is does not create more value.
Right.
The value is tied up in those 4 C's. So, what does it mean? Like, we bring in a sale, what does it really mean from a value standpoint? And we help them understand that. And also, we help the business owner and their employees understand that, because when the employees understand that, they are also on board with, focusing on value and not just bringing in more money. And I'll show you one quick story. I was with Peter Chrisman at the Exit Planning Institute training, and he said, you could, right before an exit, a business owner wants to sell more because they want their balance sheet to look great. But he said that can actually work in reverse, because let's suppose you have only a fixed number of account managers, you bring in all this new business. Well, if the customer service suffers, you could lose your clients because you're trying to bring in all this new business, and it can really be a nightmare. So it's not all just about the income. The fourth thing here, identify personal purpose. Just what do you want to have happen to your business? Do you want to leave a legacy? What do you want to leave a legacy for your family, for you? That becomes really important. And what do you want to do with the rest of your life? What are your passions? Did it get involved in your church, get involved in your service organization, get involved in your hobbies? That I think that's really important, and it's a critical part of your planning after you exit. And then lastly, establish a team. I can't overemphasize how important it is to work with a team. Exit Planning Institute is committed to working with other advisors. And historically, I think we've all worked in silos. The estate planning attorneys worked in their own silo, and you got the CPAs and the insurance professional and the financial planner. Well, you can't do that and do exit planning successfully. You need to work with a team of people that the client wants to work with,
Yep.
and you all work in concert for the best interest of the client. And I'll just finish up with you know, the Exit Planning Institute, their mantra is change the outcome. What they mean by that is there's a 20% chance you're going to have a successful exit under current statistics. So what they're trying to do is raise that percentage from 20% to 40, 50, 60%. And what drives me as an advisor is I think what powers our economy is privately held business owners and their businesses. And if you think about, and Mark, you probably know a business in your community that has 30 or 40 employees. Let's suppose that business does not have a successful exit.
Yeah.
Think of the impact on your community, your church, churches in the area, service
Yes.
clubs, the
Yes.
employees. It's devastating.
It
It's
is.
devastating.
So take me
So,
back to that fact again. 20% of businesses have a successful exit. Is that what it is?
yeah, well, they're able to sell their company. So of all the businesses that are put up for sale, 20% actually sell, which, basically what we're saying is 20% of the time, you're going to be able to sell your company. Now, business owners don't know that. They think that, you know, once they retire, all these people will start banging down their doors and
Yeah.
they want to buy, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It could for some, if they're, really best in class, they'll get a lot of offers, but it can be very, very difficult to make that transition.
So
Did
how
that help?
Yeah, it sure does. So how do people get a hold of you? I got the website up on the screen, JL.com, and looking through the site, well, certainly you've got a lot of those elements and information already there. That's what's kind of cool about it. So you looks like you kind of built the site to accompany some of these things. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I would think that if I- most importantly, to just let the business owner know that they can't work forever. As much as they enjoy running their business, they reach a point in their life where they realize, geez, I can't do this forever. And then how do I get out of here and maintain my standard of living? That's the challenge.
Every day's a Saturday when you retire, right?
That's right.
Well, thanks so much, Jim, for jumping on. My eyes are wide open because I've seen and with clients that are I'm dealing with them on the personal side. They've got business side of it, and I haven't been able to help them there. So it's good to know that guys like yourself that are certified and educated in this practice of this business transition. It's got far more factors to be considering, and obviously we've talked about this before. Is when we've been in the business for so long, we think our business value is so much greater than what it may possibly be less. And as it's been said, there's so many factors involved. So I think you can help those that want to inquire, they can inquire, and you provide a great service for business owners to help transition. Listen, folks, your business is a big, big deal, is because you've done it all these years, and why not reach out to a professional business exit planner like Jim so that you can have that optimal value and do the right things before you get ready to exit. With that, Mark Rogers here. And as always, it's always good to chat and help middle America plan for future security, growth, and control. That's what we're looking for: security, growth, and control. And so with that, Mark Rogers here signing off. We'll see you on another session. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share the channel. Safe Money Matters. We'll talk to you soon.